Prepare to plunge into a suspenseful tale where shadows of corporate greed loom over a weekend getaway, unraveling a web of deceit, betrayal, and a conspiracy that could shatter a man's world. Who can Mark trust when the line between love and loyalty blurs, and every smile masks a sinister intent? He eagerly anticipated the forthcoming weekend as he traveled home from work that day. Monday was Memorial Day, but he and Lisa, whom he had been dating for 5 years, were invited to spend a 4-day weekend at her boss, Alex Thompson's country estate. Alex was the law firm's senior partner, and Lisa worked as a legal assistant there. Mark already had Monday off. He took Friday off to lengthen his weekend. His boss, who also happened to be his father, graciously allowed him to leave early on Thursday, so he returned and hit the road. The trip to Alex's estate could easily take 3 hours, given the highway traffic and the narrow, twisting roads leading to it. He had great expectations for the weekend. The last 2 months with Lisa had not been ideal. She had grown cranky, yelling at him for no apparent reason. What used to be 3 or 4 evenings a week of excitement had devolved into perhaps a begrudging once every 2 weeks activity. Being a caring and affectionate husband, David turned to Lisa, intending to assist her in overcoming whatever was bothering her. But she dismissed him, stating she would handle it herself. Even worse, Lisa continually rejected his attempts to initiate sex or any physical contact, and she now flinched away from him when he tried to hug or soothe her. The situation was becoming unpleasant to him, and he wondered if she was having an affair. She then informed him that they had been invited to her boss's country house for the weekend to celebrate her promotion at work. Mark inquired, puzzled, "You never mentioned getting a promotion at work. How long has it been in the works?" Lisa said, "A couple of months now." "I apologize, I should have told you sooner." "So that's why you've been so distant from me recently," he thought. "I apologize for being such a bitch to you, honey. I've had a lot on my mind recently," she apologized. Mark grinned and drew her into his arms, but his heart sunk as she flinched slightly. "I cannot imagine," he said, "and to think I was terrified you were having an affair." He felt her tighten, but she soon relaxed. "No, of course not," Lisa replied. "I would never do that to you." He heard her remarks, but something about her tone sounded unconvincing. "I'm delighted to hear that," Mark pushed himself to respond, despite his rising anxiety, "because you know that's something I couldn't take." "I know," Lisa replied gently. "Do you think getting off early on Friday, spending days out in nature with you is a good idea?" "Sure, I have lots of free time. We can go on Thursday when I finish work if you choose." "That would be great." "I will let Alex know, and by the time you reach home, everything will be packed," she explained. "I promise these are weekends you will never forget." David reflected on her remarks as he filled his new pickup with gas. Weekends he would never forget. He could only hope she meant it in a positive way. However, he felt conflicted, particularly after a pretty serious chat with his father and uncle. He parked into the driveway, turned off the engine, and went inside the house. Lisa had packed everything and was ready to load everything into the truck as promised. He checked his baggage to ensure that his items were packed and ready to travel. He was impressed that Lisa had included his amenities in his travel bag. Then he grabbed the remaining bags when she entered the room, wearing cut-off shorts and a t-shirt. "You've got enough stuff here for a week," he quipped. "I assumed we were only heading out of town for the weekend." "You know me," she joked back. "I want to be prepared for everything. Why don't you load up this thing while I finish up here?" He observed sandwiches on her counter, and she was putting together a picnic basket with snacks and drinks for the road, as she always did when they went on weekend day trips. "Sounds appealing," he responded with a smile. "Perhaps these will turn out to be enjoyable weekends after all." He had a thought. He loaded everything into the vehicle, helped Lisa finish packing the food, closed the house, and left for what he hoped would be a wonderful weekend break. "This weekend is set to be the best of my life," Lisa exclaimed as Mark drove. "Trust me, you're going to have a terrific time." "I'm looking forward to that," Mark responded, thinking she was sincere. Mark took longer than intended to leave the city due to a highway accident that stopped traffic for about 2 hours. However, it did not dampen Lisa's upbeat mood, which thrilled Mark. He refueled again as they returned to the road leading to Alex's estate, then drove up the winding road through mountainous wooded country. When they arrived at the gates to Alex's large 2-story house, it was already past midnight. Lisa had the gate code, so they drove up to the big brick mansion. "Damn, it is a massive mansion," Mark exclaimed. 3 men dressed in dark suits and sunglasses approached the truck as Mark shut off the engine. "Why do they need sunglasses in the dark?" Mark questioned aloud. "I did not take our luggage," Mark suggested. "Open the pickup's rear door." "Either way, thanks," one of the men stated in a serious tone. "No, sir, it's our duty," another man extended his hand. "The keys, sir, I need to park your car." The other man, "Please, just do what they ask, dear," urged Lisa in a tone that implied he should obey these men. He looked at the man asking for the keys and observed a definite bulge on his jacket, indicating he was armed. Of course, Mark responded coldly, passing his keys to the second man, while the other 2 men quickly grabbed his baggage and vanished into the darkness without a word. "Thank you," Mark replied mechanically, as he watched the men effortlessly carry the huge bundles up the stairs. "Are you coming?" asked Lisa. "Yes, of course," Mark replied, "I'm on my way." He followed Lisa and the 2 men up the stairs. "I don't understand why they needed to be armed, something about this didn't feel right." "Oh, here you are. I wish you had a safe journey." As they entered, they saw a tall man with brown curly hair. Mark recognized him as Alex Thompson. He'd met Alex at a couple of corporate holiday parties before. Lisa and the man exchanged hugs as Mark looked at them. He then turned to Mark. "Thomas, glad to see you again. I am Alex Thompson." He introduced himself and extended his hand. "Welcome to my little home." "Thank you, nice to see you again, Mr. Thompson," Mark remarked, shaking Alex's hand. "There's no need to be so formal. Can I call you Mark?" "I have a feeling you'll see a lot more of each other," Alex added with a small smile. "Especially now that your wife is growing in the company." "Of course," Mark responded. "We apologize for being late." Lisa stated that there had been an accident on the freeway. "Yes, I heard about it here," and remarked, "I am glad you arrived safely." "Are the others here?" asked Lisa. "Others?" Mark had no idea there would be others here. "Yes, they are all here. Unfortunately, they decided to sleep early. I wanted to get some rest before Marco's party," Alex said. The man who had taken Mark's keys returned to the front door and returned them to him. "Thank you," Mark said, placing the keys in his pocket. By this point, the 2 men who had taken their baggage had returned from the 2nd story. Harold accompanied the Smiths to their rooms. "If you will," Alex placed an order. "Yes, sir," replied one of the stout men. "We'll see you early Marco morning," Alex announced. "Sweet dreams, thank you," Lisa murmured softly and modestly, lowering her gaze. Mark noticed they hadn't said anything. He simply tucked it away in the back of his mind. Maybe Dad was correct, he had a thought. "Please wait this way," Harold spoke in a dead creaking voice. Mark and Lisa followed the man up a spiral staircase and down 2 halls before reaching a locked door. He took out a key card and pressed it against the reader, and Mark heard the door open. Harold unlocked the door and motioned them to enter the room. "Oh my," Lisa said, "the room is huge and well furnished. There is also a private bathroom with a double vanity and a wide television monitor on the opposite wall from the queen-sized bed. A gas fireplace dominated one wall." Mark looked about with false cheerfulness and added, "It's really nice here." "I'm happy you approve," Harold replied. He took out 2 key cards and handed one to Lisa and the other to Mark. Harold handed 1 key card to Lisa and the other to Mark, saying, "Here are your keys. Please carry these with you at all times. Breakfast will be provided Marco at 7:30 a.m. Good night." Lisa answered, "Good night," as Harold left the room, closing the door behind him. "It's a pretty wonderful room," Mark said as he walked about and took inventory. "Yes," Lisa agreed. As Mark proceeded to hang his clothing in the closet, Lisa began unpacking her belongings. But Mark noted that she had simply placed her clothing bag in the closet without first taking anything out. "So, who are the other people Alex mentioned will be here?" he asked. Lisa said, not looking at him, "What precisely does this entail?" Mark followed up with, "Darren's new executive assistant?" Lisa informed him, "It comes with a considerable wage rise, although everyone is required to travel on occasion." "Is this good with you?" Mark asked. "As long as it does not interfere with our lives." "You know we've discussed starting a family," Mark answered. "I understand, but I may have to postpone that for a while," Lisa replied gently, "at least until I settle into my new position." "What kind of time frame are you referring to?" Mark inquired. "I am not sure, perhaps 6 months or a little longer," Lisa said. "Were you okay with that?" she asked. "I understand how essential this work is to you," Mark replied neutrally, wondering about the implications of this position, especially because they aren't growing any younger. "You've no idea," Lisa informed him, "this is a big step for me. I only ask for a little time and patience." "Okay, fair enough," Mark remarked, this while wrapping his arms around his wife. "Do you know how proud I am of you?" "Really?" Lisa asked quietly. "No, of course," he said, kissing her on the lips. "I love you, Lisa. Never forget that." "I adore you, Mark," she responded. Mark reached out to Lisa after they had climbed into bed and turned off the light, but she had her eyes closed and appeared to be sleeping. He groaned, knowing that this had been her pattern for the previous 2 months. Disappointed, he rolled onto his side and fell asleep. The sky was clear, midnight blue, and cloudless. The sun was high, and a pleasant breeze blew from the south. Suddenly, the sky darkened and was obscured by enormous threatening clouds. The mild breeze transformed into a harsh wind that grew stronger with each passing instant. The sky darkened, and clouds gathered in the distance, accompanied by a deep rumble. As the storm clouds thickened and the wind picked up, a brief flash of lightning appeared. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning struck the ground directly beneath his feet. When he looked down, he noticed a beating heart pumping blood to the ground. Except for the beating heart, Mark had seen this dream several times before, and each time he did, he knew someone would die within the next 72 hours. The last time was 3 years ago. 2 days later, his older brother Andrew was killed by a drunk driver on the spot. A year prior, his mother suffered a stroke 12 hours after his dream and died within 24 hours without regaining consciousness. Mark sat up in bed, drenched in sweat. He looked at the digital clock on the bedside table and noticed that it was 4:15 a.m. Billy arrived extremely early. Mark knew he needed to contact his father and grabbed his phone from the bedside table. Mark noticed he had no signal. He carefully got out of bed, trying not to wake Lisa, and put on his pants and shirt before slipping on his shoes and grabbing his key card. He opened the door to find one of Alex's armed guards at a tiny table in the corridor. The man in a dark suit and sunglasses looked up as Mark opened the door. "Are there any issues, Mr. Jackson?" the guard questioned. "I need to use my phone, but there is no mobile coverage here," Mark remarked. "Who are you going to call?" the guard asked. "I need to call my father," Mark told him, explaining how important it was. "Come this way, sir," the guard responded, standing up. Mark followed him into a small room next to the corridor. "You can use this phone," he said, pointing to one on a small table next to a chair. "Simply call 9 for an outside line." "Thank you," Mark said, settling into his chair. He started dialing his father's number and noticed the man standing in the doorway. "Could I have some privacy, please?" Mark asked. "Of course," the guard replied, turning away from the door. Mark could not believe how patient this person was and why he was armed. He finished dialing the number and waited. His father took over after the third ring. "Hello, who is this?" asked his father. Mark could tell the elderly man had just woken up. "Hello, Dad, it's me, Mark. Sorry for calling so early. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I was in the middle of a very nice dream about your mother, but I'm fine, Mark." Did you have another of your dreams? Yes, Mark replied quietly. He overheard his father's sigh on the other end of the line. The same type you had before Andy's accident, his father asked. Exactly the same, Mark said. I see. Thank you for informing me, son. I'm fine. Well, I'll keep my ears to the ground. Why don't you try getting some more sleep? Okay, I will, Dad. I simply wanted you to know. I appreciate that, son, but I am fine. I promise you'll have me around for a while longer. His father reassured him, remember what I said and watch your back. They stopped the call, and Mark returned to his room. Everything okay? Asked the guard. Yes, everything's fine. Thank you, Mark remarked before opening the door to his room. He undressed and returned to bed, and Lisa sighed, turning to face him. Where did you go? Is everything okay? She asked sleepily. Yes, everything is perfectly fine. I had to call Dad, Mark said. Oh, Lisa grumbled and rolled over again. From her breathing, Mark could tell she had fallen asleep once more. He closed his eyes, but sleep eluded him for another hour as he continued to ponder the troubling dream. Mark got out of bed around 6 a.m. and went to the bathroom, did his morning duty, swiftly showered before changing into clean pants and a polo shirt. Lisa followed him into the bathroom and first opened the blinds. Approaching the nightstand, Mark picked up his watch, wallet, and glanced out the window. He noticed wrought iron bars on the outside of the window and wondered why they were there. There was no balcony, and the concrete pad of the driveway approach should have been at least 8 meters high. Looking outside, Mark saw a helicopter landing on a pad at least 50 meters from his house. He hadn't realized it before, but it was dark when they arrived last night. He also spotted guards holding what looked like weapons over their shoulders. Mark couldn't help but wonder, was Alex expecting trouble? Were you waiting for breakfast, dear? Mark inquired as Lisa exited the restroom. Ready as ever, Lisa said. What happened last night? She asked. Another dream, Mark said. You mean like before your brother was killed? Yes, it is exactly the same. I called Dad to make sure he was okay. How is he? She asked. Great, Mark replied. I caught him in the middle of his dream. Lisa chuckled, which seemed vaguely unsettling to him as she finished getting dressed. Oh well, let's go downstairs and have breakfast. I am starving. Don't forget about the game, she reminded Mark. The game had been a gift from his father, given to Mark after he was discharged from the hospital many years ago during his service in Iraq. The Humvee in which he was riding was hit by an enemy RPG. 2 other Marines in the vehicle were killed instantly, while Mark and another Marine managed to escape despite severe injuries. The 2 Marines were able to take cover and defend themselves until help arrived. Mark spent months in an operating and rehabilitation center and eventually was medically discharged. Fortunately, doctors saved Mark's leg, but he needed to have his left thigh replaced. The rehabilitation center helped Mark learn to walk again, really aided by a cane. Although he could now move normally, he still felt agony after long walks, so he continued to use his father's gift. He reached Alex's table and discovered 3 other men and a woman waiting for them. Mark had briefly met these men before and knew they were Alex's law firm leaders, although he couldn't recall their names. He had never seen or met this woman before. I would like to introduce my husband, Mark, as Stonewall Jackson, Lisa declared. Mark shook hands with the others. Glenn Oldman, one of the firm's leaders, observed, Stonewall is an unusual name. My parents were great Grand Ole Opry fans back in the day, so they named me after their favorite country and western artists from the 1950s and 1960s, Mark replied. Dad used to joke that it had to either be that or Michael Stonewall Jackson. Yes, I think I recall that name. He passed away about 10 years ago, didn't he? Glenn said. That's what I heard, Mark said. The woman smiled as Mark took her hand. Mr. Jackson, I'm happy to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you. I knew the Carson. Nice to meet you, Miss Carson. Please call me Mark. I hope you heard at least a few positive things. So, what do you do for the firm? Mark asked. I am in charge of training for staff recruitment, she said. I've heard a lot of positive things, and I believe we'll be spending a lot of time together this weekend, Mark inquired. Why is that? With Janice's new position in your life, there will be many changes, Darren declared before anyone could answer. She's here to help you acclimate, adjust, he said. Why should I have to accommodate my wife's promotion? Mark inquired, more than concerned. He stared at Lisa, expecting an explanation, but nothing came. It's complicated, Darren said frankly. Let's get breakfast first. Perhaps we can get to know one another a little before we get down to business. He sat down while Alex's workers carried trolleys into the room. In front of Mark, they placed platters of eggs, bacon, bread, and fruit in front of everyone, while another employee walked around the table pouring coffee into cups. Mark also spotted the armed guards who had taken up positions on either side of the entryway. So, Mark, why don't you tell us about yourself? Rick Harmon, another executive director, inquired. Janice mentioned that you were a soldier or anything like that, Nick added, staring at Lisa. Mark looked at Lisa before speaking. He had briefly informed her of his service, but it appeared to have escaped her mind. As far as she could tell, anyone wearing a green uniform had served in the military. I served in the military, but I was never simply a soldier, Mark replied, taking a piece of his omelette, which he enjoyed. What did you do then? Nick inquired. I served in the Marine Corps, Mark responded. Thank you for your service, Darren stated. What did you do in the Marine Corps, if I may ask? Ryan Jones, the table's third leader, and a reconnaissance sharpshooter mused. Certainly. I was a reconnaissance sniper. I was deployed to a reconnaissance unit in the armed forces and was injured, Mark replied. I suppose that's one way to phrase it, Mark saw as the other executives and security personnel exchanged glances before responding. The looks around the table were unpleasant, and Mark wondered what was going on. 32 enemy soldiers failed to complete their missions, he continued casually, in a tone reminiscent of a deadly snake's warning. No, it has been years since I had to kill someone, his military intellect corrected itself. Had he disclosed his situation or warned them? It's odd that you never mentioned this, Janice, Darren said with a tinge of tension in his voice, looking at Mark's wife who is blushing slightly. Janice is not to fault, Mark stated before Janice could respond. I never told her what exactly I did during the service, partly because some of it is still classified and partly because it is a time in my life that I would rather forget. But now you are an accountant, is that correct? Rick quickly replied, jumping in to diffuse the tension that had suddenly settled over the table like an overcast day. Yes, I was released from rehabilitation and proceeded to college to pursue a business degree. That is where I met Lisa. Mark revealed that he now works as a forensic accountant for his father. What does your father do? Glenn asked. He is in charge of Jackson's specialist investigations, which are primarily for corporations, Mark responded. I've heard of them. From what I've heard, they do a good job, Rick remarked. They ended their brunch by engaging in light chat, but it did not alleviate Mark's unease about everything. He had learned to trust his instincts on the battlefield after they saved his life several times. It appears to be a wonderful day outside. Why don't you take Mark on a tour of the house while we go out to the backyard? Darren suggested. Of course, either responded. Mark tried to read Lisa's thoughts but was unable to. He didn't want to play poker with her. Look, go ahead, sweetheart. Everything will be okay, she encouraged, but a little strained. Yes, okay, Mark replied. He felt unhappy in this circumstance but realized there was little he could do just now, so he gave in to Darren and Lisa. Intelligence and reconnaissance, he repeated to himself. He took his cane and gazed at each other. Were you prepared, Mark? She asked quickly. With a vibrancy he recognized as ambiguous. Of sure, Mark said, hoping that the turbulence in his gut would subside. After you, Lisa put her hand on his shoulder before you departed, forcing him to stop and stare at her. She whispered, Just remember I love you, Mark. Mark answered, I love you too. He went in to kiss her, but she turned away. Surprised and mortified, Mark stepped back and went away silently. Until he and Eva were distant from the main house, Mark couldn't help but notice the highly armed soldiers. Close turning his back on Eva, Mark took out his phone and started the audio recording app, realizing he had 2 bars, a poor signal yet enough to make a call and pocket it. Eva finally said, "It is so beautiful here." "Are you attempting to establish a poor connection?" "Yes," Mark said evasively. We came to a wooden park bench facing a little pond and paused. Eva sat down, and Mark followed suit. "What's happening here?" he asked. "Mark, you're a smart man. Why don't you sort it out for yourself?" she responded. Mark responded, "I have an idea, but it is too awful to consider." "Why aren't you just telling me everything?" "All right. As you are aware, Lisa has been appointed as Darren's next executive assistant," Inga began. "Yes, I am aware of this. Lisa informed me about it," Mark said. "Isn't that all?" Eva asked. "No," Eva stated. "Your life is going to change, Mark. The way you react will determine if it is for the better. You are aware that Lisa loves you, right?" "I've heard her say that, but it's difficult for me to believe right now. Trust me, she genuinely adores you, and she wishes the best for both of you. That is why she is willing to do all it takes to ensure your future." I lectured Eva, "You do support your wife's job objectives, right?" Mark replied, "Of course, I always have." He felt much like he did one night many years ago, slowly crawling over the dirt, probing for mines beneath a high-tech heat-dispersing cloak. "I'm pleased to hear it from you. Then you must accept that the next year or 2 will be but a little setback on the path to a long, happy marriage." She mentioned 6 months. "Why are you saying that? What will happen over the next 2 years?" Mark inquired pointedly. "What exactly is your role in all of this?" "I will get to that. My responsibility is to prepare you for what's coming and to make certain that you fully understand and embrace Darren's expectations for you and your wife." "Why should I care what Darren expects of me?" "I do not report to him, and he does not sign my checks." "No, he does not, but he does sign hers. And your secret consent will make Lisa's job much easier," Eva explained. "Silent agreement? What the hell are you talking about?" "I'm sure you've noticed that Darren is what most people would call an alpha male," Eva said, as if it were as plain as a large flashing red neon sign. "In other words, he's an arrogant, self-centered jerk," hissed Mark. Eva smirked, which was the first genuine sound she made, and one he believed. "Let us just say that he expects people to comply and do what is expected of them. This includes Lisa as a result, you. In other words, he wants to sleep with my wife and expects me to simply accept it. Isn't this what you're trying to tell me?" "I wouldn't use such a phrase, but basically, absolutely." In reality, they've already had several personal encounters, Eva said, observing Mark's troubled expression. "And how do you know that?" "I was there. I videotaped it," Eva remarked calmly, as if capturing 2 people's intercourse was the most natural thing to do. "Are you kidding me?" "Not at all, Mark. Please have a look." Eva handed Mark her phone, saying, "Perhaps you will find it interesting." He viewed a short video footage of Lisa and Darren having sex like animals. "This is fascinating. Would you mind if I kept a copy?" He considered how it would help him in the event of a divorce. "Not at all. I saved this clip only for you." Using the phone's Bluetooth capability, Mark saved a duplicate to his own phone. "Tell me something, Mark. How has your personal life been recently?" "Not that it matters, but it has been virtually non-existent for the previous few months." "Why are you asking?" "Actually, it's my business. The rationale is straightforward. Darren asked Lisa to keep you at arm's length most of the time. He is exceedingly protective of his stuff." "What? She just went along with it?" Mark muttered between clenched teeth, his rage intensifying. "Of course, he now owns her. She obeys him, just as all of his past helpers have. And do you expect to report to him as well? Mark bristled at the word owns. He can have expectations on the one hand and disappointments on the other. Let us see which one fills up first. Mark hissed through his clenched teeth. He noticed his smirk on her face and felt the need to wipe it away with the back of his palm. So what does this jerk expect of me? Money? Unlikely, Eva laughed. He expects you to obey, to submit, and to display it publicly tonight in front of the other senior partners. What exactly are you talking about? What exactly does he want from me? The dynamics of your marriage will shift dramatically while Lisa is in her current job to reflect this. Darren has some documents for you to sign. These forms declare that you are voluntarily transferring your variable rights, property, and assets to him with Lisa acting as his assistant. After he obtains what he wants from you, he expects you to kneel before him in front of your wife and everyone else and then perform oral sex on him. In conclusion, Eva said with a neutral expression, I understand it is difficult to hear, but this is what Lisa expects from you. In fact, she is excited to see you do it. This manner, you give him complete control over your marriage for as long as he wants. Let me make sure I understand what you just stated. Your terrible boss wants me to sign everything over to him, let him have his way with me, and then have oral sex with him in front of Lisa and the other executives. Are you kidding me? I am not joking, Mark. Yes, it is what he wants. He expects you to swallow Lisa as well. Of course, the entire interaction will be captured on tape. That way, he can keep it over my head. This sounds like extortion or blackmail to me. In your words, it sounds disgusting, but it would be used to keep you in check, Eva said casually. After you've submitted to him, you'll put Lisa to bed. They'll leave for New York tomorrow morning to spend the weekend, and where will I be in New York while they are causing trouble? You will stay here, trapped in your chamber. You will be fed and looked after. When they return, you will drive Lisa back to your home, and you'll follow her instructions exactly, he responded without asking any questions. So, if I understand correctly, I'm meant to be completely messed over, forced to have oral sex with that guy, and then held as a captive against my will, and what am I getting out of this? If you agree to Darren's program, you'll be relatively unscathed aside from a little humiliation, and when he's done with Lisa, you'll be well compensated. So you idiots conspired with my soon-to-be ex-wife to end my marriage, take away my entire business, and literally rape me, is that correct? I would not phrase it precisely like that, but I suppose from your point of view, sure, we've been working on it jointly, replied the other neutrally. Did he do this alongside his other assistants? Mark asked. Yes, Eva replied, and they agreed to this crap. They even told him in fact their husbands really enjoyed it. What harm could it cause? Lisa would be delighted to see you bringing her pleasure master. I'm sure she would do exactly that. They can kiss my ass and bugger off this time, and you can tell that idiot if he attempts to pursue me, I'll do all in my power to make this the last thing he ever does. Mark, I understand you are furious, and you have every right to be, but in the end, you would win in many ways, not only one, but that is not all, more. What do you mean? Mark inquired, surprised. The contract demands you to have a vasectomy as soon as possible and indicates that you will accept and be responsible for any children Lisa and Darren have. In fact, she plans to put up a show by washing additional contraception after you sign. What if I don't agree with all of this? Let's just say you wouldn't appreciate the repercussions outlined. Some attempted to fight Darren and ended up impoverished, while those convicted of sexual offenses wound up in prison for illicit pornography discovered on their personal gadgets by accident. You may be familiar with what happens to persons who have been convicted of sexual offenses in prison. It's not a happy existence, Mark answered. That sounds like a threat. Call it whatever you want, Eva said. Okay, I will, Mark said, removing his phone from his pocket. He paused, recorded the audio recording, and then browsed through his contacts to find what he was looking for. He checked for a signal before dialing the number and holding the phone to his ear. What are you doing now? Eva asked, her face turned red with rage. Mark grinned and placed his finger to his lips, urging her to be silent. Sheriff Jackson identified the individual who answered Mark's phone. "Uncle Bob, how are you?" Mark asked. "Stonewall, what's happening?" Dad was correct. "I need an extraction quickly." "Have you got the address?" "I understand, son. I also have the coordinates for your phone." "What is your plan?" "I counted at least 15 heavily armed men. There was a gate at the entry. The code is 6973 unless they made a modification since last night. Here's Hansen, 3 of his leaders, and his trainer. She just stated the problem for me. I recorded everything on audio." "I'll send it to you," Mark said. "Understood," Bob responded. "We are already on our way. The estimated arrival time is around 5 minutes. Can you hang on for that long?" "I guess so, Uncle Bob, as long as you're willing to call it self-defense." "Thank you. I'm happy to help. I do not want anything to happen to my beloved nephew." "What? About Lisa?" "According to Hansen's trainer, she is a collaborator, already a toy for Hansen," Mark said. "I'm sorry to hear that, son," Bob remarked sadly. "Yeah, me too," Mark replied. "So, young man, you're doing fantastic. We will be there shortly." With these words, Mark concluded the call and forwarded the audio file to his uncle. "What have you just done? Who did you just call?" "I called in the cavalry," Mark responded with a smile. Eva whispered as she began to stand up, "I need to go back inside and warn the others." Mark, clearly puzzled by the turn of events, shook his head and gently walked her back to the bench. She looked at his sniper-like visage with dread and admiration. "I do not think so. We'll sit here and enjoy the sunshine for a few minutes," Mark smiled, knowing that it might be the last time he saw sunlight for a while. "I think you may have bitten off more than you can chew," Ryan replied. Janice and 4 men took their positions near the enormous pool behind Darren's house. "Why?" "Because Janice's cuckold was a former Marine, a big deal," Darren smirked. "In any case, what will he do? He is alone, unarmed, and surrounded by a small group of armed guards. If he declines his offer, we proceed to Plan B." "Just be careful," Rick warned. "Don't worry," Darren said, "I have everything under control. We'll get him drunk tonight, and when the time comes, you'll cheerfully do anything I want." "I can't wait to watch it," Janice chuckled. "Are you going to make him swallow as you did with the others?" "Of course," Darren answered. "By the end of the weekend, your little weakling will be begging me," he said, making Janice laugh like a schoolgirl. "Just don't push him too much," Ryan advised. "He isn't like the others, they were weak." "They are all the same," Ryan said. "No, this is not true. This is a Marine who has been taught to kill. You should be ready for anything." "Relax, Ryan, I'll handle it," Darren mumbled. "But I'm curious about something. Why didn't you know about your husband's service?" "Well, it's exactly what Mark stated," Janice responded. "He never told me any details, all he could say was that he had served in the army." "It does not matter," Darren snorted. "He is going down tonight, your career will rise." "What happens if he files for divorce?" "Then I'll destroy him just as I did the others. He'll face jail time for illicit pornography or worse." "Don't worry, darling, I will take care of him." "What is that sound?" Glenn inquired, looking around. Everyone remained silent and listened. There were distinct helicopter sounds all around them. Suddenly one of Darren's guards charged up to the pool. "We have a problem, Mr. Hansen," he complained irritably. "What is it?" Darren asked. They heard shouts and the sounds of a scuffle among men, then they noticed 2 police officers in uniform and bulletproof vests approaching the pool, rifles at the ready. "Halt," instructed one of the sheriff's deputies. "Drop your firearms," the deputy told Darren's guard, who quickly obliged, not wanting to be shot. Other sheriff's deputies entered and handcuffed Lisa, Darren, and the other 3 men. "What's happening?" demanded Darren. "I will have your badges for this." "Quiet," the sheriff's deputy declared. "You're all under arrest." Before reading a detailed list of accusations, he ended by reading them their rights. The sheriff's deputies led all 5 detainees around the building, where they saw 4 helicopters, a bus, and 3 large vans. Officers were everywhere, leading handcuffed and disarmed security personnel to the bus. Lisa noticed Mark standing next to a hulking man in khaki uniform. "Mark, what's happening?" she yelled out. Mark and a burly man approached her. Mark told Lisa calmly, "Your little party is over." "Sorry, I forgot my manners." "Lisa, this is Sheriff Robert Jackson. You remember my Uncle Bob?" "Correct, Uncle Bob," Lisa gasped weakly. "I didn't realize you were the sheriff." Bob smirked. "I guess that slipped your mind. Please, this is all a giant misunderstanding. You had to believe me." "No, Lisa, I do not have to believe you. In fact, I don't think I've ever been so shocked and disappointed in my life. I'll visit my lawyer as soon as possible to start divorce proceedings." "From this moment on, you're dead to me," Mark remarked. "You understand, dead." With these words, Mark grabbed Lisa's left hand, removed the rings, and pocketed them. "You son of a bitch," Darren growled, futilely trying to break free from the grip of the 2 sheriff's deputies holding him. "I'll be out of jail in no time, and then I'll fucking kill you. Do you hear me, you fucking piece of shit? This sounds like a threat to me." "What do you think, Uncle Bob?" Mark asked with a smirk that surpassed all Darren's previous malice. Bob said, "Of course, I thought so too. We'll just add this to all the other counts against him, and it'll assist ensure he's never released on bail. Do not worry, Mr. Hanson. My boys will take good care of you," he smirked. "And your friends, take these people out of here," he ordered the sheriff's deputies, who immediately complied. Mark and Bob watched as the criminals were loaded onto the bus. To Mark, the past few years of his life seemed like a lie. He had loved Lisa when they first met. Bob touched him on the shoulder. "Everything will work out, son. Believe me." Bob had gone through a divorce with an unfaithful wife many years before and understood Mark's agony. "Thank you, Uncle Bob, for everything. Don't mention it, son. If you need anything, give me a call and give your dad my regards. I believe he has a bottle of his best wine ready for your visit." "I'll do just that. Is it safe for me to collect my things? I need to get out of here." "To hell with it. Of course, I guess they're almost done inside that place anyway," Bob told him when they bid goodbye. Mark packed his belongings and went home. A week later, meeting with his father, Mark met with the family lawyer and filed divorce papers pursuant to the prenuptial agreement they signed before the wedding. He waited for them to be processed before visiting Lisa in county jail. "This will be the first and only time I visit you, Lisa," he said when she took her place. "By law, I had to make sure you had the documents." "I've got them," Lisa said quietly. "I've already signed and sent them back." "Good. As you may have observed, I followed the prenuptial agreement. I'll wait for your trial to get rid of your things." "I appreciate it," Lisa remarked. "There's something I don't understand." "How did you find out?" "You hear all the gory details in court, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. I suspected something was up a couple of months before that weekend, but I didn't have any proof. About 4 months before that memorable day, Darren's ex-husband of one of his so-called assistants came to Dad with a really strange narrative. He also produced certain spreadsheets and documents which he claims his ex-wife obtained from Darren's system. Dad made me go through the spreadsheets to see what I could find. Naturally, I couldn't tell you anything about privileges, conflicts of interest, and the like. It took some time, but when we finally found what we were looking for, evidence of all sorts of illicit money dealings with some fairly dubious persons. Your sweetheart did a wonderful job hiding them, but not well enough. A few weeks before that weekend, Dad turned over all he owned to the feds. We were more than interested in Hanson's affairs. In fact, they planned to raid your offices in June. Dad warned me to be very careful that weekend. He related what his informant had informed him, but he found it very hard to accept. We talked to my Uncle Bob, who, as you know, is the sheriff of the county where Darren's land is located. I was hoping nothing would happen, but it didn't turn out that way. Carson informed me about your plans with your lover. By the way, I taped that brief exchange. I'm delighted we live in a place where such recordings require only one party's consent. Nevertheless, I have a few questions for you. What would you like to know? Lisa asked. How long had you been sleeping with your alleged boss prior to that weekend? About 2 months, Lisa answered. Mark was startled at how frank she was being. Around that time, things started to go wrong for us. Did you tell him to shut off communication with me? Yes, she answered quietly, her face going hot. Then I should certainly get tested for sexually transmitted infections, Mark suggested, making Lisa even more embarrassed. Did you really want me to be this intimate with your lover? Lisa lowered her eyes and refused to meet her husband's gaze. So he pressed angrily. She glanced at him again, tears welling in her eyes, and again, yes, she said, of course, you knew I would never gladly consent to that. I prefer to die first, so why? Because I was so in love with Darren. I would have agreed to whatever you asked. You do not comprehend. He relished wielding authority over everyone around him. Lisa revealed that if I hadn't obeyed, he had a backup plan in place. Do you mean drugs? Yes, they discovered a container of drugs he planned to use against me. I have nothing to do with that, Lisa insisted. That's interesting because they found your fingerprints all over the bottle, which shocked Lisa. This shows me you were a part of his plot against me. No, I never wanted to hurt you, she wailed. The evidence suggests otherwise, Lisa. Not only did you cheat on me, but you also collaborated with your so-called master to destroy me as a man. So there is no turning back, no never, no forgiveness, nothing. As I told you that day, you are dead to me, Mark snarled as Lisa wept hot tears, but remained unmoved. I've already spent enough time with you. Goodbye, Lisa. With those words, you can make the most of the rest of your miserable existence. He stood up and went away unfazed by her cries. After multiple court appearances, Lisa, Darren, Eva, and others were convicted guilty of all accusations against them. As the ringmaster, Darren received a life sentence in federal prison, which means you will never be eligible for release. The 3 executives who played minor roles in Darren's criminal financial operations were sentenced to 20 years in prison.